was never a mistake. Chapter 1. I walked into the Trattoria Romano a couple of minutes late. Eyes forward, I slipped between tables lit by soft fairy lights, and almost didn't blink when I saw them already gathered. Margot sat in the center, as always, her posture ballet-like. A straight back, her manicured hands resting on her purse as if it were the armrests of a throne. David was beside her, like a loyal page. Emma, her sister, always glued to her phone, flickered a glance. None of them stood up. I nodded politely and offered a half smile. Almost genuine. I was wearing the simple blue dress, the one hanging in my closet since I moved in with David, in which I used to feel myself, not his wife. The dress smelled of gardenias. Not from whatever fabric, but from memory. A summer evening in Toulouse when I was 17, and my mother had finally allowed me to go to a park concert. I was wearing another blue dress then, but that feeling, the sense of being myself, returned only tonight. "Happy birthday, dear," Margot said, her tone more like a farewell than a toast. A bottle of wine stood on the table, unopened. They had waited for me. David popped the cork with too much effort, as though he wanted to prove he was still useful. The wine fizzed at the neck. A drop fell onto the tablecloth. "You are 35, Margot continued as he filled the glasses. "A serious age. And you're still young, of course. But perhaps it's time, to choose where and with whom you go." I nodded, but didn't answer. Those words echoed almost verbatim from my last argument with my mother, only she said them with reproach. "You're always hiding in your kitchen. And time is passing, Jean. No husband? No child? How long will you keep running from life?" We argued then, fiercely. 3 weeks later, she died. And those words remained forever. A scar beneath the chest, unseen, but present. "Thank you," I said, raising my glass. We clinked. Emma tapped something on her phone, eyes fixed. David pulled out a small package. "A gift from all of us," he said. Margot insisted on the wrapping. I, unhurried, untied the ribbon. The paper was pink, dotted with butterflies. Somehow I remembered that the same butterflies once decorated the wallpaper of my childhood room. Back in Toulouse, when my father still lived with us, and Mother we hadn't yet started drinking. They were morpho, bright blues, like the tropical sky I'd stared at in encyclopedias. My first dream was to go to the Amazon. Then to become a tour guide. Then a cook. Then just disappear. Inside was an envelope. Thin, office stock, forms, a folder with plastic corners. I glimpsed the lawyer's signature. "We thought this would be fair," Margot said, her voice trembling slightly, as if she too regretted being arbiter in a stranger's fate. David slid his phone away, flicked his hair back. I heard him exhale. "And elegant," he added, trying to smile, but his lips quivered. I took the pen, the one I bought in Annecy on a weekend when we laughed so freely, as if the future didn't exist. Page 1, signature. Page 2, signature. My finger trembled slightly. I handed the folder to David as if handing over not a folder, but a part of myself that I could no longer hold. All three were silent. Emma stopped tapping the phone. Somewhere in the corner of the hall, a saxophone started playing. Tony emerged from the kitchen carrying dessert for a neighboring table. He cast me a quick glance and barely perceptible wink. He knew. "And now," I said, reaching into my clutch for another envelope. It was white, heavy paper, the smell of printing ink. Inside, a copy of a job offer. The logo, Grand Plaza Hotel, Lion, salary, housing, start, in 2 weeks. "This is my gift to myself, and to you," I said. Margot didn't understand right away. Emma dropped her phone. David parted his lips like he wanted to say something, but said nothing. I smiled, softly. Not with triumph, but with freedom. "Thank you for everything." I stood up, leaving an empty glass on the cloth, and I walked out, quietly, lightly, like someone going home, only this time, to herself. Chapter 2. I woke up to silence. No happy birthday, no note, no scent of coffee, Nothing like in the first years, just the smell of night, a little stale air, a trace of old dreams, and the rustle of leaves outside the window, as though the city was softly whispering something through the blinds. On the bedside table sat the alarm clock, a mechanical one. David used to laugh at it. "You're like a grandma, Jeanne. You have a phone." But I liked the way the hands snapped forward, a reminder that time moves on, even when you feel frozen. I sat up. My feet touched the cold parquet floor. The apartment felt chilly. The heating had been failing for 3 weeks. David said he would call someone. He said a lot of things. In the kitchen, emptiness. A lonely toaster stood against the wall, and on the table lay half an apple left by David. He had gone out early. In the past, on Saturdays, we used to have breakfast together. Now everything had turned into, whenever it works out. I put the kettle on, opened the chamomile tea jar. For calm, I sometimes thought I was born with anxiety in my chest. Only childhood never had a word for it. On the fridge hung a child's drawing, a gift from my nephew, Emma's son. It showed Aunt Jean wearing a crown and holding a huge pie. The caption, in crooked letters, "Queen of the Kitchen." I never removed it. That drawing was the only kingdom where I had ever been acknowledged without condition. Suddenly, the phone rang. I jolted, picked it up. A voice said, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Valois? This is Jessica Martinez from Grand Plaza Hotel." I knew such a call was possible. I had hoped, but I did not believe. Who calls back when they see 35 and waitress on the resume? Who sees the person behind the paper? Jessica. She saw. We talked for almost 10 minutes. When I put the receiver down, I stared long at the window. Outside, the street lived a regular Saturday. People walking to the market, dogs pulling leashes, the bakery smelling of fresh baguette. I sat again, calm, almost detached. I knew I wouldn't tell David about this, and certainly not Margot. At noon, I opened the wardrobe. I rifled through dresses slowly, as though sifting through past lives. There was the one we wore on our trip to Venice, the skirt Mom used to call too tight, the jeans I'd worn when I fell off my bicycle behind my grandmother's house. I selected the blue dress, the same one I once sang karaoke in with friends. Back then, I still laughed easily and curled my hair. And then, the dress, the laughter, they were all mine. I reached for my clutch. Small, strict, but inside, bright blue, the color I had always hidden because it stood out too much. Today? No. I held the white envelope in my hands and read the lines again, slowly, as if every comma might alter fate. $45,000. Housing included. Start in 2 weeks. Yeah, paused on those words. In the hallway, the light flickered from the lamp. And in the mirror, I saw a woman in a blue dress, eyes that remembered fear, shoulders hunched from fatigue, looking back at me with surprise. I took a deep breath. My spine straightened. I was calm, steady, tired, but not broken. Chapter 3. The morning it all began was suspiciously ordinary. I'd even say, unbelievably ordinary. No different from any other. The kettle, the raindrops on the windowsill, the neighbors upstairs playing the news louder than necessary, and the street outside my kitchen window, looking like a fragment of an old film reel. I walked into the kitchen barefoot and froze. Margot was sitting at the table, in a robe. In my kitchen, in my morning, like a ghost of good manners from another century. I'm not sure what shocked me more, the fact that she was there, or how perfectly natural she looked there. As if the kitchen had always belonged to her, and I was the temporary guest. "Good morning, Jeanne," she said, her voice thick, slow, like sugar melting in overboiled coffee. "I didn't want to wake you. David left early. Gave me his key." "How thoughtful," I said. I opened the cupboard, took out a cup, turned, and saw the envelope on the table. Pink. With butterflies? Yes. The very same one that would later end up in my hands on my birthday. Now it just lay there, like a bomb wrapped as a present. "This is for you," Margot said, smiling. I didn't touch it. I just sat down, as if this were part of some game, and my role was to pretend I knew nothing. But inside something cracked. A tiny, almost inaudible sound. When I was little, I heard everything, even what I wasn't supposed to hear. Mama called me sensitive, not as in kind, no, as an accusation. You feel everything, Jean. That's not normal. You need to be simpler. Look at me. And then she would go on about everything she felt, as if I were her personal therapist. At 6.5 years old, then she'd pour herself a bit of wine, just one glass, and start talking about what an egoistic bastard my father was. It made me hurt, uncomfortable, and somehow ashamed. Ashamed for him, for myself, for how much, according to her, I resembled him. He left when I was 8. One day he simply didn't come home. Mama said he was on a business trip. Then, that he was in another country. And then, that he was gone. In every possible sense. I asked questions, aloud. Then, to myself, into a pillow, into the ceiling, into the sky. Once even at confession, though I wasn't baptized. I just wanted to try. The priest said, "Pray for him, that he may find his path." And I remember thinking, I wish someone would show me mine. I got angry, and I stopped waiting, almost. Sometimes I imagined he'd come back, call, write, explain. Then I stopped imagining. But I still flinched when unknown numbers appeared on my phone. Margot watched me closely. She drank coffee from my mug. The strawberry one. I knew she chose it on purpose. It was that same mug I'd bought the day I learned I was pregnant. I wanted to correct her. To say, "Put it back. Leave. Vanish." But instead I asked, "And what's the occasion?" I nodded toward the envelope. She smiled sweetly. "Oh, it's a surprise. But don't worry. Everything is arranged. You deserve the very best." Words straight out of a shampoo commercial. But I already knew, when your mother-in-law says you deserve, she means you'll get what she has decided. I left the kitchen without touching my tea. In the bathroom, I stood under the shower for a long time. Hot water ran down, but inside, I felt cold. That feeling was familiar. It had lived with me before, when I heard the diagnosis, when I lost the baby, when my mother died. Cold wrapped in everyday routine, sharp, piercing, so deep that tears didn't come yet, or maybe no longer could. I remember a nurse in the hospital saying, "You're still young, there's so much ahead," and I wanted to scream, "There is nothing ahead, only emptiness." But I stayed silent. I always stayed silent, because being inconvenient meant being guilty, and I didn't want to become like my mother. Chapter 4. That day, I left the house early. I told them I had errands. In truth, I was just walking, wandering the city, staring into shop windows, buying pastries I didn't want, trying to feel something real, not like I was trapped in a life that wasn't mine. Still, one thought wouldn't leave me. What's in that envelope? What is she up to? Intuition doesn't scream. It whispers, "Be ready." I arrived at Romano earlier than usual and headed to the kitchen. Maria, in her apron, flour smudged on her cheek, glanced up. "You look like the Statue of Liberty today." "So serious," she teased. I smiled. Only Maria could say something so silly and still make it feel like a warm blanket. "And Tony said you look like Miss France today," she added. "He's picky, you know. He's head over heels for Leticia from the bakery. But he still says you're the best of the grown-ups." "The best of the grown-ups?" I laughed. "Yeah. Among the ones who pay taxes and don't wear light-up sneakers." I exhaled. These moments, they saved me. Then came the dinner, the envelope, and me, in blue. And the strange thing, I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was just ready. Sometimes I think my childhood wasn't stored in memory. But in that salt shaker with the broken lid my mother refused to throw out, everything in our life had that same flavor. Too salty, too sharp, and never quite sweet. Everything, just a little too much. always on the verge. So much edge, the joy got worn out. Even happiness felt exhausting. We lived in a small apartment in Toulouse, top floor, peeling shutters. Our windows faced a courtyard that smelled like charcoal and roast chicken on Sundays. My mother used to say that the smell of other people's food was the scent of poverty. So I figured we must have been very poor, because I loved those smells. My mother was complicated. She had a beautiful voice, long fingers, and a fierce sense of injustice. She could cry if a dog got abandoned in a movie, and yell at me over a forgotten umbrella. She made the best broth in the neighborhood, and sometimes lived on nothing but yogurt for a week because she had no appetite. I loved her, but often with pity, and pity is a dangerous kind of love. She used to say I was too soft, then not feminine enough, then too weak, that I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I never quite fit, not her tone, not her hopes, not her shape for me, but sometimes, usually after wine, she'd look at me and say, "Jean, you're all I have. Just, for God's sake, don't live my life." And I tried. Chapter 5. When I was 15, I dreamed of opening my own cafe. A little one, on a street corner with yellow curtains and cupcakes in the display window. I sketched layouts, wrote menus, and clipped recipes from magazines. In an old album, I still keep a page titled Chez Jean, le sourire en dessert. I made up the slogan myself, childish naivety, or hope, however you look at it. Mom said then, "That's sweet, but you're not in a fairy tale. Money, people, taxes, you won't make it." I folded the page. Once, then again, then put it in a drawer, where it stayed. Until one day when, but no, that comes later. 6 months after the funeral, I moved to Paris. Mom had died in a traffic accident, a taxi, a red light, a moment's misfortune. We weren't at war, but we weren't at peace either. In the end, we didn't manage. And that is the worst pain, not managing to say, "I get you." Even a little. I had no plans, no connections, just a suitcase, an old laptop, a lifelong dislike of pink, and a childhood-born hatred for weakness. I rented a corner in a former college friend's apartment, got a job as a waitress in a cafe. Then, at Romano, they were hiring a girl with charisma and love for people. I was terrified of people, but I said I loved them. Romano believed. From the first day, I felt that this place wasn't just a job. It was a rhythm, a pulse. Kitchen shouts, laughter at the bar, Tony's stupid jokes, runaway cappuccinos, and gratitude from familiar customers. You make this place shine. Maria taught me how to cook real pasta, al dente, with soul. She said, "Food heals, especially when no one listens to you, but at least you're full." So I ate, listened, stayed silent, and then I started hearing myself. Sometimes they ask me, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Because I felt I didn't deserve it yet. I wasn't ready. I believed if I just held on long enough, things would get better. Happiness will arrive like a bus, I thought. Just stand at the stop and keep your eyes open. But I blinked, and everything changed. Love is when you smile, even when you're soaked to the skin. From my diary, 2011. We met in the spring, of course. How else could one meet living in Paris, weary of life and listening to Aznavour in the evenings? It had to be spring, otherwise it doesn't count. I had been at Romano for 2 months. Still shy, still mixing up table numbers, still feeling that offering dessert was as intimate as a confession. David came to lunch with colleagues, in a light gray shirt, a backpack that looked like a school bag, and the confidence of someone who already knows what he's going to order before he sits. Menu of the day, still water, and he lifted his eyes. "What would you recommend?" I said the first thing that came to mind. "Artichoke pasta. They're underrated, just like me." He laughed. I blushed. The colleagues pretended not to hear. Later, one of them winked at me from the bar. We started dating a week later. Not because of some fireworks, but because it was quiet, comfortable, easy. He wasn't loud. He didn't pressure me. I didn't check my phone every hour. I didn't rehearse sentences before seeing him. We just sat on a bench by the Seine and shared ice cream, interrupting each other with childhood stories. He wasn't unburdened either. His parents divorced when he was 10. He stayed with his mother. Yes, the Margot. But at first, she was different. Warmer. He said she lost faith in people after Dad. And now she only played it safe. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. Chapter 6. When I found out I was pregnant, I stared at the test for a long time. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I couldn't remember what happiness looked like, and I was afraid to be wrong. We hadn't planned it, but David, I think, was even happier than I was. "This is going to be a girl. I just feel it," he said, placing his hand on my belly, which hadn't even begun to round out. "How do you know?" "Because there was always something soft and warm inside you. And now, it's more." That kind of phrase made me uneasy. But I smiled. Later, I bought tiny little booties from the pharmacy. Pink ones. Me? Who always hated pink. But at the time, why not? Pink felt like hope. We lost the baby at 16 weeks. No one was at fault. No illness. Just, sometimes, just because, is cause. I remember the hospital ceiling, how it cracked under the summer heat, and the nurse whispering, "Jeanne, you must let it go." How do you let go of something you never got the chance to hold? Afterwards, everything got quieter. We were still together. Hugs, dinners, movies. But a third presence settled between us. Silence. It sat at the table, lay between pillows, breathed close behind our necks. We didn't fight, didn't accuse. We simply drifted apart in place, each with our grief. Sometimes I remember an evening, inexpensive wine, kitchen lights, rain outside. He said, "I thought we could be happy, that we could make it." "We did," I said, "just not for long." He didn't answer. He just took my hand and pressed it to his cheek. I felt him cry, quietly, soundlessly. I felt sorry. For him, for us, for the real we used to be. Margot invaded our lives a little later. First, from a distance, carefully watching. Then, her silhouette drew closer, like a shadow in a dark alley that never promises good. Dinners, advice, opinions, and her favorite line, "I only want David to have a decent woman by his side." I tried to comply at first, genuinely. Bought the blouses she suggested, stayed silent when she said that working at Romano was not a real career, stayed silent when she insisted I wash knives a certain way. One day, she came unannounced and caught me in a robe. "Hope you don't welcome his friends like that?" She sneered. I wanted to reply, to say something sharp, but I didn't, because I saw David walked in right after her. In his eyes, I saw something apologetic, not to her, to me. And I realized he didn't know whose side he was on anymore. I remember the last day we really laughed. For real, no masks, no scripts. A small thing. We were looking for the car keys. I had turned the whole house upside down. He found them. In the freezer. I said, "Probably a hint. Drive to the Alps." He laughed, almost choked. And I laughed with him. Later, we cooked al dente pasta, following Maria's recipe. I thought, this time, maybe, good will come. We still have a chance. But the pasta ended. The laughter, too. Then they started planning the birthday. That birthday, my celebration. But it turned out to be their final staging. Sometimes, I think love isn't about what happens in the beginning. It's about what remains at the end. What remained of us was silence and a pink envelope with butterflies. But I remember. It was real, even if short. Putting on someone else's coat doesn't make you that person, especially if the sleeves are too short. From the diary, Winter 2021. When I decided to pull myself together, I even started with shoes. I thought if I bought pointed leather heels, everything would change. I would become one of those women who click confidently on metro tiles, adjust their glasses at a job interview, and keep their life in neat spreadsheets. I truly believed I just needed to stop being myself, and everything would go right. Chapter 7. At Romano, I asked for time off. I told Maria I needed a break, that I had to grow. She snorted. Grow, baby. Just don't stretch yourself too thin. I laughed, but inside, I was already setting myself up. This time, it will be serious. I wrote a resume. My photo showed me smiling as professionally as I could manage, which for me meant suppressing the cough rising in my throat. I downloaded a cover letter template, rewrote it 5 times, each time shorter. The final version sounded almost like a plea. I am reliable, hardworking, a quick learner, and I love people. Please, give me a chance. The first interview was in La Défense, a business district. Glass and concrete, people with one earbud, eyes staring at nothing. I arrived 40 minutes early and used the time studying the skyline from the bathroom window. A young woman with bright red nails greeted me. She looked like a magazine cover model for Your Success, but without the spark. Her name was Sandrine. You have, restaurant experience, she said. Her tone implied I'd admitted to stunt driving graveyards. Yes, 7 years, shift management, service, working with people. Uh-huh. Our clients appreciate experience, but we need a more analytical profile. You know Excel? Only at the level of I fear you. Sandrine didn't smile. I felt like a potato thrown into a box of exotic fruit by mistake. The same thing happened in Boulogne-Billancourt and Nanterre, and in 3 companies whose names I have already forgotten. All interviews blurred into one gray loop. Dreary offices, coffee in plastic cups, polite impossibilities. They told me, you have amazing charisma, but with such empathy, you'd fit well with us, but we're sorry, but 47 buts. I counted every single one. So I went back to school. Evening classes at IUT Paris Cité, HR management, marketing basics, communications, notebooks again, lectures again. I was 34 and I sat next to Lena, a girl of 20, who said she was still not sure if she even wants to work. I held on. I passed everything with top marks. When they handed me the certificate, they added, "Good job. Now the main thing is to find someone who gives you a chance." Find someone to give me a chance. Something magical, a possibility, a favor like alms given at church gates. I was tired of waiting. At home, things were growing quieter. David came home later, watched screens. One day I showed him my certificate. He said, "Cool, we've got an MBA holder in my department who still can't build a proper spreadsheet." I smiled. Not because it was funny, because that was all I could do. Margot called almost every day. "So, any replies?" Don't rush into the first thing that comes along. Just don't go back to those waitress habits. Now you're David's wife. One day, I asked her, "And what if I don't want to be just David's wife anymore?" She replied, "That's your delusion. You don't get to choose who you want to be. Life chooses for you." I had no answer, only a thought. What if life is me? Then what? Money was melting. I canceled streaming subscriptions. I started buying food marked down with yellow stickers. Sometimes I took shifts, secret weekend jobs at old cafe friends. Quietly, David thought I was staying with a friend. My friend thought I was at home. But I was at Romano, behind the bar, back where I belonged. And in those hours, I breathed. Not lived, but I breathed. Chapter 8. One night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my email. No replies again. I walked to the kitchen, took out a jar of fig jam. You know, the one David doesn't like, but somehow always finishes. I spread it on a baguette and sat down by the window. Outside, rain boiled the puddles under the dull glow of old street lamps. And I thought, what if I no longer want to be proper? What if I just want to be? That night, I pulled out my journal. I opened it and wrote in big, bold letters on a new line, "Jean, you can do this. Happiness is not when they praise you. It's when they believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself." Note on a napkin from Maria. I returned to Romano feeling like I was coming back to shelter after bombardment. No one asked extra questions. No one asked how the interviews went. No one tried to explain why the job market works this way. They just said, "Show up at your station. Shift at 9. Tony's slow today. Watch him." I stood up and exhaled. Senor Romano was the sort of man you simply couldn't imagine ever being young, probably born wearing that apron with thick eyebrows and an expression that meant sternness, kindness, and a gentle fatigue from all of us. "You're back," he said, without lifting his eyes from the inventory ledger. "Temporarily," I answered. He waved a hand. "Everyone comes back. Just make sure you wear good shoes. The floor is slippery if the soul is wandering." I think that was his way of saying, "I'm glad to see you." Maria, the kitchen's heart, hugged me as if I'd survived a shipwreck. "There's our Jean again," she said. "I was starting to think you'd run off to a convent." "Seriously, girl, it's been so boring here without you." I began talking to the soup. I smiled, almost cried. But I held back, because I learned long ago how to cry inside. 10 minutes later, Tony bounded up. "Are you really back? Can I teach you some new TikTok dance moves?" "No, Tony," I said. "And if I first learn how to carry trays without spilling drinks, then maybe." He raised his arms in triumph, like he'd just won the Olympics, and dashed off to customers with such fervor, as if he wasn't carrying water, but the future of France. At Romano, time didn't pass by clocks, but by scents. Coffee meant morning. Rosemary sauce meant lunch. Burnt garlic meant Tony was thinking about Leticia from the bakery again. There, I was no resume, no wife, no improvement project. I was simply Jeanne. Sometimes the one who recommends artichoke pasta. Sometimes the one who pulls the pot from the heat just before it scorches. Sometimes the one standing at the counter, smiling not because she must, but because she can. At home was quiet and cold, like a waiting room in a clinic. David came home later and later, sometimes tired, sometimes with distant politeness. He stopped asking how my day was. He'd say, "I left you pasta, but no sauce." You'd say it was too salty anyway. I didn't answer. I ate quietly, as if food wasn't for taste anymore, but for holding on to living. At family dinners, they corrected me. "Jean, your fork. Hold it differently," said Margot. "Maybe you should try a shirt with a collar," Emma suggested. "Important that a woman is, well, put together," David said, as if he was complimenting. I smiled, nodded, and thought, put together, like a closet, closed, convenient, silent. Chapter 9. At night, I couldn't sleep. I rewrote my resume. I reread my journal. On one page, I found, "I want someone to hug me not because I'm pretty, smart, or useful, but just because I am me." On another, "Today, Maria said, you're like a cinnamon bun. Everybody thinks you're soft, but inside, you're spicy as hell." I laughed, quietly, into my pillow, because suddenly, I wanted to live again. One afternoon, between shifts, I sat in the backyard of Romano, with a cup of coffee and a piece of baguette. Senor Romano passed by, stopped, looked at me, and said, "You know, your eyes have changed." "How?" I asked. "Like someone who's been underwater, but got out." I didn't answer. But the phrase stayed with me. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I wasn't thinking about David or Margot. I thought about how one day I woke up and realized I'm alive, no matter what. I took out a notebook and wrote, "I am that cinnamon bun, spicy, warm, and I will no longer let anyone bake me into a stale crust." Sometimes hope sounds like a simple ringtone. The point is to press answer in time. From the diary, spring 2022. It was Tuesday. One of those days that feels like Monday. Only you're one day closer to Friday, but still too far to start feeling better. I stood by the kitchen window, sipping yesterday's coffee, watching the neighbors opposite. On the 4th floor, Madame Lemaire hanging her doormat over the balcony again, as if she were protesting some great injustice. On the 2nd, a young guy with dreadlocks, apparently launching a DJ career at 9 in the morning, with his speakers grinding out all the noise they could produce. A mixture of crackle, static, and early ambition. I watched it all and thought, maybe I should pick up a weird hobby too. Collect napkins from cafes? Or learn Esperanto? Anything. Just to avoid feeling like I'm living the same day again, only wrapped differently. Then the phone rang. The number was unknown. The country? France. That in itself felt like progress. I almost didn't pick up, almost. But my finger moved to the green button on its own. Good afternoon, Mrs. Valois? A woman's voice, professional, yet warm. Yes, that's me. I'm Jessica Martinez, HR from Grand Plaza Hotel in Lyon. We received your resume. I listened. And slowly, inside me, as if someone wound up an old music box inside my chest, something began to stir. Joy? Hope? Shock? Jessica continued. We believe your service experience is unique. We're looking for someone with a living approach, not just number crunching. We offer 45,000 euros per year, housing nearby, medical insurance, and internal training. Could you start in 2 weeks? I didn't answer right away, because at that moment Madame Lemaire dropped her doormat, and inside me I heard a click. The world shifted. Yes, I can. Yes, of course. It's unexpected. Sometimes good things happen unexpectedly, Jessica said, and I heard, in her voice, a smile. Real, not corporate. Chapter 10. After that call, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, like after a crash. Only this time, the crash had a plus sign. The coffee went cold. My heart, the opposite. I grabbed a sheet of paper and started to write, plus housing in Lyon, salary, leaving Romano. A new start, finally, movement. I didn't list out the minuses, not because they didn't exist, but because I didn't want to. I didn't want to spoil the moment or test my resolve. No one was home. David had gone to a meeting. Margot, likely off to manage someone else's plans. I was alone, with myself. I wandered around the apartment, went into the bedroom, opened the closet, looked at the suitcase, gray, old, with a sticker that reads, I love Provence. One I'd slapped on in those honeymoon days long ago. Ready? I asked the suitcase. It stayed silent. Maybe it was offended I hadn't used it in a long time. I decided not to tell anyone. Not because I planned a surprise. Not because I didn't trust them. Just because, sometimes, happiness is like a balloon. Blow the wrong direction, and it flies away. I wanted to hold on to mine, even if only for a few days. The next day at Romano, I was different. Not in clothes, not in expression. But inside, Tony noticed. You look like you're in love. Who's the lucky one? Me, I answered. He thought a moment, then said, That's awesome. Once I fell in love with myself, too. But then I had to break up. I can't stand someone stuffing their face in bed. Maria rolled her eyes. Don't listen to him. In a past life, he was a kettle. Warms up fast, but noisy. I laughed. And in that moment realized, I haven't laughed like that in a long time. Without armor. David didn't notice. How was your day? He asked over dinner, without lifting his eyes from his phone. Not bad, I said. Still Romano the same? For now. He nodded, turned inward. I stayed at the table, and for the first time I thought, what if, for now, actually means not anymore? That night, I went to bed early, closed my eyes and imagined a new city, a new hotel, a new street, a new air. Maybe it would smell not of wine and Margot's perfume, but of chestnuts and morning coffee. Maybe there'd be a bookstore where the clerk knows me by name. Maybe there'd be Jean, the real one. Then I fell asleep, with no dreams, and for the first time in months, without anxiety. Chapter 11. No one knows exactly when you became strong, because you simply stopped falling, out loud. From a note in the phone. We're celebrating at Romano, said Margot, with that tone that didn't allow objections. It's logical. You work there. Everyone knows you. Cozy, modest, family style. They'll give you a discount. We already reserved a table. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I knew. The quieter I stay now, the louder my silence will be later. I didn't prepare for that day like it was a party. I prepared for it as my personal premiere. This time, No one else's lines. No director in the form of Margot. No prompter in the form of David. Just me and my stage. 2 days before, I had washed that blue dress. It smelled like a vault of memories. A little dust, a little vanilla, and a little the old me. The one who loved karaoke was too afraid to show feelings, and once wrote in her diary, "I'm not a format, I'm a playlist by mood." I put it on that evening to test. It still fits perfectly. No compromises for the body, no straps to hide a thigh, no pins to look appropriate. It was simply mine, like skin. On the day of the dinner, I woke early, washed my hair with that same shampoo, smelling like mint and freedom. Had breakfast without my phone. Looked out the window. Tony texted me. "Tonight, you'll be like Beyoncé, only better. Because you don't sing. Thank God." I laughed. Later, Maria added, "And don't forget, we love you even if you smash the dishes." At home, David tried to be normal. He made pancakes. I watched him flip them, like it was his exam on normality. "Tonight will be beautiful," he said without turning around. "Uh-huh," I answered. "Mom really tried. She even ordered butterflies." "Butterflies?" "Yeah, decorations, theme, as if flight, lightness, femininity." I nodded. "Of course, butterflies. A perfect symbol if you want to delicately disassemble someone." I arrived at Romano a little early, entered through the kitchen. "Ooh, you look like a movie today," said Maria. "What kind?" I asked, pulling on gloves. "A French one, where no one understands the ending, but everyone cries." I laughed. I felt lighter. In the dining hall, the guests were already gathering. David's family, Emma, in a blouse that cost more than tonight's bill. Aunt from Neuilly, with a Hermès scarf and a face that never smiles, only informs. Margot at the center, in pink, with platinum earrings she wears only on special occasions. Her smile, almost kindly, almost. In her hands, the envelope, pink, with butterflies. I looked at her, and I understood. She thought tonight she was putting the period. But I had already written my capital letter. Chapter 12. I entered the hall. Fairy lights swayed above the tables, their glow flickering in the glass of wine goblets. Voices hummed, soft laughter floated, and the faint clink of cutlery and plates. For a moment, everything stilled, as if the room had held its breath along with me. Inside my little purse, the offer letter, the contract, the address in Lyon, and a single piece of paper. One line, written in someone else's handwriting, but with a voice I knew. "Jean, don't forget yourself." I clenched my fingers, my heart pounding, not with fear, with life. Margot turned toward me. Her gaze slid over me, sharp as a beam. David rose, gently touched my hand. Beside him, Emma, glued to her phone, as always, somewhere beyond the moment. The other guests, prim, neutral, glasses of wine in hand, waiting. "Happy birthday," said Margot. Quietly, almost officially. "You look," David began, then stopped. His smile remained half done, like an unfinished sentence. I nodded, smiled back. Not at them. Margot handed me the pink envelope. The one with butterflies. The same butterflies that once patterned the wallpaper of my childhood room. The ribbon held it tight, like silence holding back tears. I took the gift, slowly undid the knot. Every rustle of paper sounded louder than the music. Inside, a folder with documents. Forms, lines, stamps, the final pages of their story about me. "We thought that'd be honest," said Margot. "And pretty," added David, hitting record on his camera. I picked up the pen, the same one from Annecy, from that weekend when we still laughed for real. I signed. My hand shook, but not from fear, from farewell. I handed the folder to David, without a word. He took it, as if it were an artifact. The silence in the hall felt almost physical. Someone placed a fork down. Someone set aside a glass. Someone, maybe, understood. I opened my clutch. The paper inside rustled, as if afraid to be heard. I laid the white envelope on the table, like a challenge, an answer, a goodbye. "And this," I said, "is my gift. To me." Everyone froze. "Grand Plaza Hotel, Lyon. Start in 2 weeks. Housing included, offer signed." My voice was steady, even gentle. I didn't shout. I didn't apologize. "Thank you for letting me go." Margot blinked slowly, like she was trying to parse what I had said. David looked down. Emma finally tore her eyes from the screen. Chapter 13. When no one fits you into their stories anymore. You begin to live your own, from the birthday diary note. For a split second after I said, "Thank you for letting me go," the world, it seemed, froze. Or at least, Romano did. Even the coffee machine in the kitchen fell silent. Tony froze mid-carry with a tray, as though his coordinates had been cut. Someone coughed in a corner of the hall. Emma dropped a fork. David stood frozen with his phone, still recording. And Margot, for the first time, lost her face. Not because it contorted. On the contrary, it turned too proper. A silent mask of pride entangled with shock. "What is this?" she asked, without meeting my eyes or looking at the papers. "My new life," I answered. Silence fell again, heavy, like a blanket too warm, pressing down on the hall. Then a voice rose. "Well, finally, it was Señor Romano." He stood from behind the bar, where he only sat on special occasions. He removed his glasses. For the first time in a long while, the sternness was gone from his face. "We're losing the heart of Romano," he said. "But Lion gains not just an employee. It gains a human being." And then someone in the hall, not one of my group, just someone, started to applaud. Quietly, slowly, one clap, then another, then more. One of the regulars stood, raising his glass. It was Pierre, a retired lawyer who used to order ravioli every Tuesday and claim they made more sense than politics. "To Jeanne," he said, "to the woman who knows how to leave with grace." Toasts began to pour like pepper from a broken mill. "To the real lady, to courage, to freedom. May all the former lovers be so lucky." I stood in the middle of that ring of light and clinking glasses, in the blue dress, with empty hands, and, for the first time, wholly myself. I stood, in blue, among light, eyes, and applause, without a role, without a costume, without fear. I, Jean, not a part, not a function, not someone's, just alive. And I had not lost myself, neither there nor here. Tony ran up to me, out of breath. "It was like in the movies. Did you see her face? Mother-in-law?" "Mother-in-law, Tony." "Yeah, mother-in-law. That's exactly it. I thought she'd burst, like a donut in the microwave." "Donuts don't burst, Tony." "Well, I tried." We both laughed. In that moment, I realized I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Not with defense. Maria stepped up, laid her hand on my shoulder. "Good job, Bun." "Bun?" asked Pierre. "She's special," Maria answered. "Cinnamon bun, with character." I returned to the table. David sat there, phone lowered. You knew?" he asked. Yes. "All this time? Didn't you?" He didn't answer. And in that silence was his truth. He wasn't angry. He didn't accuse. He just, for the first time, realized he didn't know me, and maybe never tried. Margot stood. "Congratulations, Jean. This was unexpected." Her voice still held itself, yet there was no triumph, only lost control. "Thank you," I said. "You always wanted me to change." "I did." She didn't answer. For the first time in our acquaintance, she lacked words. The restaurant kept living its life. Orders still came in. Someone asked for more wine. Someone for the bill. Romano didn't stop. Just as life doesn't stop, even when a revolution happens inside you. I stood, hugging Maria and Tony, shaking Pierre's hand. Maria pressed a small note into my palm, rolled into a cone. On it, "You did everything right, even if doubt ever finds you." Remember, a cinnamon bun deserves to be happy. I walked out onto the street. Paris was usual. The smell of baguettes, traffic, chatter, something spilled, someone laughed. But inside me, calm, pleasant calm. I looked at my phone. Calls? 0. Notifications? 0. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Chapter 14. Freedom isn't a shout. It's when you no longer need to scream. From a letter to myself, Lion, April 2023. Lion greeted me with drizzle and bad coffee. I stepped off the train, carrying my suitcase like a small dog on a leash, and for several minutes, I simply stood there looking at the map on my phone, asking myself, where am I? Who am I? And which way? Straight or left? The navigator insisted. Turn right, as if it knew I had a habit of stubbornly going left. In life, in character, and on the street. So, I turned right. And, surprisingly, ended up at the right building. My first little miracle. The staff apartment turned out to be better than I expected. And yet worse than in the photos. Everything was white, square, quiet. No smells, no traces of a past life. Just smooth surfaces and a fridge that held one strawberry yogurt, without the strawberries. I turned on the light, set down the suitcase, took off my coat, and sat on the edge of the sofa. Well, hello, freedom, I thought. You smell faintly of antiseptic. Grand Plaza Hotel, a building with a facade like from a movie. Tall, with mirrored doors, a doorman in white gloves, and the smell of citrus-scented polish that hits your nose like a respectful sneeze. I went in, took a step, another, approached the reception desk, where Jessica Martinez sat. The same woman whose voice once pulled me from my gray Paris days. You look even better than on your resume photo, she said, and you look more alive than in my imagination, I replied. She smiled, broad, genuine. This will be interesting, Jean. Welcome. And yes, she said my name not like a record in the system, but like a name that mattered. The first days passed in quiet observation. I learned the new system. Guest cards, buttons at the front desk. How not to mix up a VIP with a just important guest. In the evenings, I came home, brewed time tea, and wrote, Today a guest from Argentina asked for a lavender pillow. We found one. He said, Lion smells just right. Maybe I'll start smelling right too? Jessica wasn't just a mentor. She was like a navigator with a soft voice. You are the most empathetic person I've ever met, she told me on day 3. Is that a compliment? It's a responsibility. She spoke with no pomposity. Simple. And there was more truth in that than in any motivational quote. The neighbors in the building turned out to be a mixed lot. Below me, Madame Arnaud, who sang opera every evening. On my floor, a guy named Elias, who was always hauling bicycles through the stairwell and kept confusing my heels for his slippers. Yes, we're still sorting that out. Upstairs, a child who believed running is the only way to exist. Just running and screaming. I wasn't angry. That was the sound of life. After silence, almost music, a month later, I gave myself the first Saturday without a schedule. I went to the bakery, bought a croissant and coffee in a paper cup, sat on a bench by the Rhone. The river flowed gently. Bicycles rolled by. Someone read a newspaper. Someone stroked a dog. I took out my notebook and wrote, Today I'm in no rush. Today I am just Jian. Not a version, not a project, not an expectation. Just me. Chapter 15. 4 months later, Jessica called me into her office. We have an opening for assistant GSM. GSM, guest services manager. Somewhere between coordinator and God. Do you think I can handle it? I asked. I think you already are handling it. Just quietly. I went through the interview. No heels, no resume. Just a story. They hired me. 6 months later, I was guest services manager. Yes, I still tangled up reports. Yes, once I mixed up Monsieur Delacluse with Monsieur Delacour, and they both wrote thank you notes. No one has miscalled our names so politely in a long time. I got used to Lyon. It became not new, but mine. I learned where the best croissants are. Where the bookseller at the corner gives a discount if you laugh at his jokes. Where you can walk, and the city doesn't expect you to be someone else. Where you feel cozy and safe. One evening, I sat in the kitchen, in that same white chair, with a teapot, with the smell of cinnamon, and suddenly I realized silence returned, but not as emptiness, as space, a space where I belong. Sometimes you don't need to move forward, just come back to yourself. From a letter to a girl, Lion. The court was like an administrative canteen, too bright, too quiet. All faces are equally tired. I sat, flicking the edge of my jacket, thinking, if only, instead of judges, there were a chorus, like in a Greek tragedy. They'd sing, Jeanne, now everything will be different. But instead of a chorus, there was a judge with glasses, slipping down his nose every 3 minutes, and a clerk tapping a pen so rhythmically it sounded like a nerve test exam. The case was simple, divorce finalized. The question, surname, do you wish to revert to your maiden name? The judge asked, without raising his eyes. Yes, Valois. Reason? I smiled. Because I am Valois. I always was. I just stepped out for a while. The clerk looked at me and, for the first time during the session, smiled. The judge nodded. Done. It was decided. Just like that, I came back to myself. No fireworks, no applause, but with the feeling you get after a hot shower. You're back in skin that fits you. David didn't show up. He sent a lawyer. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. He was always better at absence than presence. Chapter 16. I stepped out onto the street, and Lion greeted me with spring. Sunlight dropped between rooftops. Children kicked balls by the schoolyard. Passers-by greeted each other with bonjour, just because, as if that too was a way to show you're alive. I bought a croissant, walked to the park. On a bench, I opened my notebook and wrote, I'm Valois again. And not because he's bad, but because I am real. A week later, I sent the video from the birthday dinner to the archive. No, I didn't delete it. I simply moved it into a folder called Old. I made the apartment mine, bought curtains with yellow flowers, got a cactus, named him Gustave, after the neighbor who once helped me with a stuck door and told me, you don't look like someone who gives up. Just remember how you look in the mirror. It works. Gustave, the cactus, doesn't talk, but also hasn't died, which I count as a success. On my kitchen shelf, I now have a collection of mugs. From Paris, from Annecy, from that little bookshop where the bookseller had nudged me to take one, saying, take this. With it, your coffee tastes honest. On the windowsill, my notebook. Sometimes I still write in it, not because it hurts, but because inside is quiet and I want to leave traces. In the evening, I wrote a letter. The first and the last. To the girl who never was, but who still belongs to me. Hi. I don't know what you'd be like. Funny or serious. Maybe you'd love artichokes or hate them like Tony. But I know you'd be yourself, and that'd be enough. Thank you for being with me. Even in memory. I won't forget, but I will no longer live in the shadows. Jean. I folded the sheet, didn't close the notebook, just left it open, to the air. Sometimes guests check into the hotel who remind me of me. They look down, whisper a thank you, smaller than it should be. I smile, hand them their keycard, and I think, you can too. Just remember, you're not a mistake. You are a story that's still going. Sometimes life isn't about a turn, it's about continuation. Not with fireworks, but with a breath. In the closet hangs the blue dress. Not as a reminder, but as proof. I existed. I exist, and that's enough. Sometimes, to believe in your own story, you must hear someone else's. If you've read till the end, it means our paths met not by accident. Maybe you also once had a blue dress, or an envelope that changed everything. Or maybe you're still looking for a notebook where you'll write your I am not a mistake. Tell me, even a little, even one line, about you. about your pain, your laughter, about how you became yourself again. I believe your voice, already a path, and a word, already a step. And yes, if you have a cactus with a name, write too. With Gustav and me, it's a tradition.